Hi, everybody. Nice to see you today. So as Nancy said, I'm the Associate Vice Provost for Research. I've been in the role for about 3 years now. From a training in neuroscience to the last 15 years or so in research and academic administration. And my role is to work with our leadership on the research strategy for the university and also oversee the Office of Research Development and Partnerships, which I'll talk a little bit more about, and the Office of Postdoc Affairs, and work across the Provost's office and across the President's office to help get the resources and support that our researchers need. So yeah, Niazi said, this is kind of a rough day to be talking about research and grants. We planned this well before the inauguration, obviously, in the last week. There's been a lot of announcements that have not necessarily been the most uplifting. So I wanted to just, before I get into the talk that I'm going to give, despite all of that news, is sort of say, yeah, there's a lot of information coming out right now in response to the recent executive orders, and there will probably be more executive orders and more announcements and confusion. At the moment, what we're hearing is that a lot of things are paused in terms of federal agencies giving out grants, reviewing grants, even paying on existing grants. So it's very, very concerning. At the moment, it looks like a 2-week period of time that this pause is in place. And we've heard from our federal consultants that this is not completely out of the ordinary, in the sense that anytime there is a presidential transition, new people do need to move in and start to have an influence. It's maybe a little bit more extreme and excessive than we've seen in the past, but it is supposed to be temporary. My interpretation, in a generous way, but still I think my conservative interpretation is that the next month is going to be really, really mysterious and anxiety-inducing and rough for a lot of us who are in research and rely on federal sources for funding. After that month, the pause will be lifted, things will resume, but it will be a new normal. And there will be certain priorities that are shifted, and we will all have to adapt to that. And we are working really closely with the President's office and the Provost and everybody at the university to figure out who is going to be most affected in our community and how can we provide them with support to get through this. Because this is also a transitionary period. This is also temporary. There are future elections coming, and we can hold on to hope that the priorities will once again shift, and we'll be able to, benefit from that. But it'll be a long, 2 to 4 years here for some people, and we're just doing our best to figure out how we can leverage what we have at this university to support people and find other ways to continue the great work. So I just wanted to leave that message out there and deal with that at the top before I launch into kind of our rah-rah speech, actually, about how great NYU is, which it is. Federal government may not be, but NYU is. So next slide, please. This is a bunch of numbers that gives you some sense of scale of what NYU's research operation is. It's kind of hard to make sense of some of these numbers without any kind of context. So let's go to the next slide. Some of these numbers point to us being the #1 university in New York State for research, number 12 in the whole country, number 5 among private universities. This is in terms of the scale and size of our research here and how much money we spend annually on research. And our vision is to be a leader in global scholarship, innovation, and entrepreneurship. We arguably already are, but we'd really like to be even more influential and more impactful. So we do a lot of work across research strategy and development, the area that I oversee, research operations, to make sure the day-to-day is all in place and supports you as much as possible. And then entrepreneurship and innovation. Where do we see our research outputs going in society and in commercial areas and other places? So this is what that #1 in the state is referring to. $1.46 billion of research expenditures in 2023. We know that number is going to go up in 2024, but we still haven't finished calculating it all yet. And this has been sort of a tremendous amount of growth over the past decade plus. So it's made our ranking move from 39, 40s to number 12. And this is all because we've been really placing a lot more emphasis on research and providing those support services to help faculty go out and get this funding, and then be able to spend it on doing the things that they want to do and then getting their publications and papers out as a result of it. More context that puts NYU here in this, pretty elite group of universities. Johns Hopkins is number one, has always been number one on this particular scalar for like a long time, since 1979, because they basically run a piece of the federal government. It's a National Institute lab that they've been running, and that adds about $2 billion onto their annual expenditures. So they just get that boost. But if you look, if you look at this, the dollar amounts in between these is really not that great. So like a couple $1 million here and there, maybe $10, $30 million. That's just a few grants, right? And so we're kind of like in an elite territory here and in a very competitive territory. So again, this is why we put a lot of emphasis on what can we do to invest more resources into and make sure that our faculty are able to compete for those grants. Not because we necessarily need to be number 10 or something like that, right? But because we want to make sure you're getting the grants and they aren't going to other people. Next. So this is focusing in and excluding our School of Medicine. What I showed you before was including the School of Medicine, because that's how we report out to the world. But School of Medicine is sort of its own separate entity. And this is the rest of us, which is still doing an amazing amount of growth. We've increased our federal funding, we've increased our nonprofit funding, we've increased this bucket, which is called all other sources, very vaguely. But a lot of what's in here is international funding. We've increased our own funding in research, and we recently hired somebody to help us increase funding from industry as well. So we are a diversified portfolio in terms of where our funding comes from. This is a big chunk of it, the federal chunk, which is right now a little sketchy and scary, but so we have so much more funding from other sources as well. It's not the only thing that we rely on. Next. These are our top funders. So from the federal government, the NIH and the NSF, by far. These are small in comparison. Other government, we get a lot of money from New York State, New York City, other municipalities across the country, and other countries across the world as well. Norway Ministry of Foreign Affairs is one of our top funders. A lot of foundations and nonprofits. The Simons Foundation is one of our top funders, but there are many others as well. And we have people dedicated to that as well. And as I mentioned, we're growing industry. We have some industry funding. These are pretty small buckets right now, but something that we hope to grow. And we collaborate with a lot of other folks. So these are direct dollars that are spent, that are provided to us. Some of these are subcontracts that we're getting from others. We're subcontracting money to others as well. The NYU School of Medicine is our #1 collaborator, and we're their #1 collaborator as well. But also you can see like other nearby regional universities that are also part of that. So the reason why we've been able to grow our research expenditures and the research operations is in large part because of all of you, because we have more faculty and other researchers applying for grants than we ever had before, which we think is fantastic. So the purple here is the tenure track and tenured faculty. So we've been able to increase the number of tenure track and tenured faculty who are applying for grants, but we've also expanded the use of the PI status for applying for grants to contract faculty and other titles and other researchers who are able to lead research projects as well. And so you'll see that those are in this like aqua color, and they're also applying for more grants. So as we see, one of our goals is to just increase the number of people who are able to apply for grants and have the resources to do it. And then we've been successful in doing that. Next. We also spent a lot of our effort on trying to make sure that the grants going out are of higher quality. So how can we provide resources for proposal development, and grant writing and grant editing and those types of things. I'll get into that a little bit more later. We're also trying to support faculty to apply for larger and larger grants. So particularly the more senior faculty who have been leading their laboratory research for some time and now could be doing collaborative projects, maybe interdisciplinary across schools or maybe collaborations with other universities. And these lead to these larger and larger grant proposals. And we've been really successful in leading quite a few incredibly large proposals across our portfolio. So this is from the Silver School for Social Work. This is from physics, and this is also from physics. We have nursing on here, we have Abu Dhabi. So really from all over the university, we're seeing some of these really large grants come through. Next. And another way that we're increasing our research portfolio is by leveraging the global network and by thinking globally. So last year, we did research in 107 distinct countries across the world, plus Greenland and Antarctica, which are not countries. I learned doing this analysis. And yeah, this is something that we're putting a lot more emphasis and effort into, sort of helping people find the partnerships, but also providing the support to make it happen, because international research can be tricky in a lot of cases. So with different rules and regulations across countries. So we have a team of people that are designated to support faculty learning how to navigate those. Next. Okay, click. All right, so these are some of the headlines that we've gotten in the past year or so that are related to our research portfolio. I've already mentioned the #1 research university in New York State, but we also have faculty who are the most cited. Nature Index names us a rising star in research, also based on publications. #10 for neuroscience, #15 for AI, world leading climate, members of the National Academy of Sciences. Click next. We also have some headlines in entrepreneurship and innovation. And so I wanted to take a moment to just show you some of those resources as well, in case there's ever anything where you want to patent something or trademark something or start a startup. So we're #10 in entrepreneurship and innovation, #42 for patents, and #1 globally for the percent of funded companies led by a female founder. One of our favorite statistics. Next.
That deserves a round of
Next, please. These are some of the startups that have come out of research that's been done at NYU. And it's really just like a few. There's many, many. On the next slide, I have some more like broader statistics of what our outputs have been. So we have 50% more startups per research dollar than the national average. So we're really punching above our weight here. Since 1980, 232 startups have come out of the university. In the past 5 years, it's been 80, and that's 8th nationally. Lots and lots of patents, $2.4 billion in licensing revenue off of those patents. And currently at least 50 products on the market. I'm not sure how outdated this slide is. So there's a lot of stuff going out into the world from our research that's having a positive impact. Next. I think I can skip this, but just to basically say, like, we're doing more and more. So disclosures is the first step. If there's something that you think you've come up with that's a brand new innovation, the first thing to do is disclose that to our technology transfer office. So I recommend doing that. And then from there, things like patents will flow, licenses will flow, and things of that sort. And I have some slides in here later, which I probably won't get to, that introduces you to the entrepreneurship office and what they provide. Okay, so I'm going to just very quickly tell you, maybe remind you of what the Office of Research and Innovation, formerly called the Office of the Vice Provost for Research, is, what we do, and who we are. Next. So I mentioned these 3 buckets at the very beginning, and kind of drilling down into what each of these buckets mean. These are the kinds of services that we help support and provide faculty. You're going to get all these slides later, so you can kind of then figure out who's in what bucket and who do I need to talk to and things like that. But basically, under research operations, our sponsored programs office, which are the people who actually submit the grants on your behalf and accept those grants on your behalf, research integrity and ethics, conflict of interest, conflict of commitment, responsible conduct of research, human subjects protection, animal protection, research lab safety, and research data management are some of the major buckets under that research operations. They're there for you all the time, whether you have a grant or not. My office, research development, we provide seed grants to help people as they're getting their research started, starting a new research question, starting a new collaboration, whatever it may be. We want to help provide some seed money so that you can get that started and then hopefully go on to get your own external funding. We work on communications. We work on events that try to bring people together across the schools around research topics that are interdisciplinary in nature. So for instance, in September, we had a really great climate change and energy event that brought people together from all over. Speakers were from the engineering school, from the law school, and from the Department of History and Arts and Science. Corporate engagement and partnerships, so also interacting with cross-sector folks who might be interested in partnering with you on your research. And we also work really closely with our government affairs office. Data and reporting, et cetera, et cetera. Then the entrepreneurship and innovation, which I mentioned, tech transfer office, the Leslie E. Labs and Entrepreneurship Institute, investing in our potential startups. Next. And this is kind of how the office is organized structurally, right? So Entrepreneurship and Innovation Venture Fund is one office, Office of Postdoc Affairs, my Office of Research Development and Partnerships, the Tech Transfer Office, and then all these folks under the Research Administration and Operations Office, because that takes up most of our time. Next. And these are the people that you would talk to from each of those offices. So this is, I think, maybe the most important slide in the deck that you get to take home with you. I put the email addresses on there because you are supposed to reach out to them and talk to them. Do not hesitate. Don't feel like you're burdening them or anything like that. That's their job and they're here for you. Next. So I wanted to get into, just want to make sure, yep, okay. Just a little bit on applying for grants internally and externally. And then if we have time, looking forward at some of the strategic pathways from our president's office. Next. So, you know, I showed you the structure of the office, but this is kind of the timeline of how it works. So we call this sort of the pre-award phase, idea generation, or building the research team that you need in order to pursue a project, things like that, those kind of early activities. You don't necessarily have a grant identified to apply for, but you have an idea and you want to work on it. And that's when my office is really involved. Yeah.
So can you, with a show of hands, who's STEM here? Raise your hands high. And who's non-STEM, humanities, arts? Right. So if you could.
Yeah, it applies to everybody. This is not just a STEM thing. This is for everybody.
Right.
I've given the same talk at Tisch and at Gallatin this year. So this really isn't exclusive to STEM research. Some areas seem like they are, but even our lab safety office is not exclusive to STEM because they work with a lot of artist studios that have like waste materials that they, so it really is inclusive of everyone. And we do have internal seed funding programs that are general, that apply to everybody. And then we have some specific ones. So every other year or so, we run a humanities specific award. Sometimes we'll run a climate change. Sometimes we always run one with the migration network. And so we're always looking to spread the wealth across the community. And so, yeah, so we're available to absolutely everybody. And this all applies to everybody. The external funding doesn't have to be federal. It can be from foundations. I even sometimes partner with our development office to try to help with donor outreach and things like that too. So we do all of these kind of early stage things as people are kind of getting together an idea and a team of people to work with. The Office of Sponsored Programs gets involved when there's an actual grant to write, and then they will work with you to get all the components together and get the submission in and also bring the award in. Once you have a grant, they help you, but also the finance department will also help you in terms of actually doing the accounting and making sure that all the expenses align with what you're supposed to spend it on. And then they'll report out the stuff to the sponsor. And then all of these things, which are available all the time, as I mentioned before. Next. So some of the first steps for research at NYU, maybe you've done some of these already, maybe you haven't. But I think one of the first steps is making sure that you know who is within your department or your school that helps to support research grants administration. So they usually will help you decipher what the sponsor is looking for in the opportunity, and they can also help you with the internal systems like CAIUS. Sometimes your school or department might not have one of these if they don't have much of a grant portfolio, but you always will have a project officer in the Office of Sponsored Programs. So you can look that person up and have a meeting with them to talk about what they do, how they can help you. You can also look on our website to see what research working groups we have that are active, and you can email to request to join those working groups so that you can learn about the funding opportunities that we send out to those groups. And you can also talk to folks in the libraries and IT around data services. So whatever research field you're in, there is some kind of data that you're working with. And they can help you in terms of letting you know what resources are out there for storage, for management of the data, for sharing of the data, archiving when it comes to that, and other aspects of it. They're experts. So connecting with these folks is really important as you're getting things started in your lab or your research group. Compliance. So this obviously does impact STEM a bit more. A lot of the grants in STEM require compliance training, but there are other things that are applicable to everybody. And so I do recommend taking a look at what's on the Responsible Conduct of Research website and just checking out this page. We have a wiki. Right now it's a wiki. It's going to be turned into a WordPress site, but the Research Development Office and the Office of Sponsored Research have this page with all these resources that will help with finding funding, proposal development, what are the requirements in order to submit a grant. So it's sort of like a resource that's there as you need it. You can go in and take a look at stuff ahead of time, but when you're really starting to think about a grant, is a great time to go in there and be like, okay, which templates are there in there that I can use to help write my grant? What websites do I need to register on in order to submit this grant, and those kinds of things. And of course, your project officers can also help you with those as well. And I'm going to tell you a little bit more about InfoReady on one of the future slides, but that's our internal funding sort of data warehouse. So I'll tell you more about that. And then getting organized. So I mentioned the data services group. Data management and data security should be top of mind as you're starting your research. You want to get out on the right foot with both of these so that you don't have to go back and then fix things later. So talking with those folks, very important. For those who have a lab or will have a lab, SciShield is something that will be relevant to you. It's where you're going to go for compliance training, chemical inventories, and things like that. Next. So drilling down into a few of these that I just mentioned, some of our strategic priority areas are up on this slide. They're kind of in flux at the moment. Because we have new leadership that's come in and priorities are changing all the time. But you can look on our website for up-to-date information on the research working group areas that we are sort of focusing some of our effort on in terms of funding opportunities and organizing events.
So how do they join the research working?
All you have to do is send an email to research.development@nyu.edu.
Okay.
For a lot of this stuff, that is the go-to email address. Next. I mentioned the wiki. So if you aren't familiar with it already, now is a good time to snap a shot of this URL, go there and bookmark it. It's going to be a go-to place for information. Grantforward.com is an external tool that we have membership with. So you can set up a free account there, and then you can tell it what your research areas are, what you're interested in, and it can then populate like what grants it thinks that will be relevant for you. And you can kind of continue to fine tune it. It has access to so many grants. At first, it may seem irrelevant, many of the suggestions, but as you work with it a little bit more, it gets better and better and more fine-tuned. And you can set it up to send you an email once a week, once a month, or you can just go to it for whenever you feel like it. And then InfoReady, this is another website that you can also check out sooner rather than later. It currently has our current list of what internal funding opportunities are available. That list changes as new things come on and other things go off. So it's something to just check in on periodically to see if there's something that's relevant for you. And that can help you with your funding. And if you don't see something, you can always reach out and ask, is there going to be something, a call in this area anytime soon? Next. So this is just to reinforce that you should really look at those internal funding opportunities because our seed grant programs are incredibly impactful and successful. So we've given out about $6 million, probably more than $6 million at this point, and that's led to $211 million in awards. So really, really strong return on investment. Those seed grants go out to people all over the university. We try to avoid actually double dipping on faculty so that but you know, sometimes successful people get more grants, but that's fine. But they do go out to everybody. Next. And this is an example of some of the internal grant opportunities that we've had over the past year or so. So you can see the Institute of Human Development, Social Change, Center for Humanities, NYU Discovery Research Fund for Human Health, which is very interdisciplinary, digital humanities, climate change, music and audio research. So a really wide assortment of things. Next. I mentioned Grant Forward. This is one of the ways to find external funding. You set up a research profile, save your results. You can set it up to send it to you weekly if you want or however often. Next slide. Another way that you can find external funding targeting more the nonprofit side of the world is through, I called this foundation directory is the one that I mostly use. But again, NYU is subscribed to this, so you get access to these resources for free. So you can either look for foundation directory or GuideStar on Candid and start doing some preliminary searches on there to see what kinds of opportunities you can pull out of that as well. Next. 8,000 grant makers, 66,000 grants. So again, it takes some time. You're not going to necessarily get like, oh, wow, this is a perfect fit on the first search. So plan some time to spend with it and certainly come back to it as your research questions evolve and change and become more specific in many cases. Thanks. Next. And then this is, I'm already over time, but I will just very quickly say, this is my 10 tips for writing grants to myself, which I will share with you. And the number one thing that I want to say about writing a grant is that only one step is the writing. And there are a lot of other steps to getting the grant right that aren't about the writing. And you have to make time for all of those steps. So once you see a grant you want to apply to and you have a deadline, you have to figure out how am I going to make time for making sure that I read the instructions and I know what they're asking me for. This takes a surprising amount of time, especially from the federal government. But even some of those foundations, they're pretty quirky and you sometimes need help interpreting those instructions and what they're really looking for. Understanding who's going to be reading the grant and reviewing it. Is it your peers? Is it staff at the foundation? Who is it? Because those are the people you're writing to and you need to know that ahead of time. Oftentimes, I think junior faculty in particular find this step to be confusing, murky, mysterious. Do I do it? Yes, you do it. You should reach out to whoever is the contact person on the funding opportunity and try to set up some time to talk to them about what your idea is and whether or not it's responsive to their call and see if they'll give you some advice that will help you guide it towards being more fundable. And there's different stages at which you can do this depending on what the funding agency is. But think about it, once you identify the funding opportunity, am I ready to share my idea now with that program officer? Or do I want to work with building my collaborations that are necessary for this grant before I go do that? But really have a plan for when you're going to insert this step in the process before you start writing. before you seriously start writing. And then edit, get feedback, get other people to read it. Make sure that it's intelligible to somebody other than you.
But-
You are an expert in that work, so you need to get other people who are not experts to know that it's actually like getting across the point that you're trying to get across.
And you do have accountability group partners just right here in this cohort, because one of the things we've seen is there's just no time by our departmental faculty. See, it has to make sense to everybody. It could be something, a methodology someone else doesn't use, but it has to make sense, okay? Because your reviewers could.
Yeah, so once you figure out who is gonna be reading your grant, find out who in your network is most like those people. So if it's your peers, use one of your colleagues in your department or multiple colleagues in your department. If it's not, you have to find other people that are outside of that immediate network because they're gonna have the same level of comprehension as the reviewers of the grant. I wanted to put this here as well because I know that many people aren't necessarily gonna be applying for like an NSF grant right off the bat, especially if you're working with foundation funding. A grant may not be the first thing you write at all. It might be the last thing, and it might only be once they've decided they want to fund you. You might actually be reaching out through a letter of inquiry or through a concept paper. And these are a little bit different. And I have some resources that I can share with you from our development office on how to prepare some of these documents as well. I think that's probably enough.
But so you know what? She has many slides, which I will post on Brightspace.
Yes.
You want to tell them what the rest of them?
Yeah, so I have some slides in there that are about the strategic pathways from the president. So just to give you a little bit more intro to those. And then I have a huge appendix that is slides about all the offices in the Office of Research and Innovation. So if you need more information about what those offices do, who the people in those offices are and how to contact them, what resources they provide, it's all in there. Sometimes the websites can be difficult to navigate or hard to find the right one. Slides have the information, the slides have links.
Let me zoom for a second.
There's like
and maybe we have
50 of these slides.
Yeah, maybe we have a few
but-
minutes for questions.
yeah.
Right, you wanna go front and center, Nina?
I'm not seeing off to the side.
All right.
Can I ring the cowbell? Yes, go ahead.
I have a question about interdisciplinary research. I know that's encouraged very much.
Yes.
And research that also uses kind of all the kind of new technological tools like mapping, visual representation. I'm not very familiar with those terms. I'm in the humanities and the social sciences, but I know that's very much a STEM thing and data-driven kind of research. So if you can give us maybe a kind of how can we as people in the humanities and the social sciences incorporate some of that into our work or
Yeah.
form collaborations with, and I know NYU really encourages that across schools that are in the sciences or other beyond just the humanities and the art, because I find it's, I struggle with that a little bit, but when I see it in other projects, I admire it very much. So if you can give us some ideas or advice where to start and how to go about that.
I think one of the first places to start is to look at the Center for Digital Humanities. So this is an initiative that's been running for quite a while now, and it really is devoted to providing resources to those in the humanities who want to have that more technological approach added in, whether that's in sort of visualization, AR, VR stuff, or if that's in AI and data science approaches. So they're there as a primary resource for that. So that's one place that I would start. We're also we have events all of the time. I mean, there's events everywhere all of the time. So I would also keep a lookout for events that might feature some of those things. We could do a better job, I think, of communicating out what existing collaborations there are in this space as well, where we already have faculty that are bridging that gap. Some places that you could look for that, there's Manny might know this better than me. There's this, there's a Tandon and Tisch sort of collaborative programming. I don't know how collaborative they are right now, but ITP and IDM, okay, which stands for, I know what they do, but I don't know what they're called.
Integrated digital media and ITP is like, I've always.
Something technology program.
I think it's.
Interactive technology program. So one's in Tisch, one's in Tandon. They both are around this intersection of arts pretty broadly defined and technology pretty broadly defined. You'll also find a lot of work in especially in the Tandon side on things like accessibility and sort of how do we develop technology with real life humans in mind. So a lot of that aspect in there too. So I would check those 3 places first and start talking to a couple of faculty from those who particularly resonate with the type of work that you do.
It was an acronym in one of your earlier slides, PI.
Only one?
One that I didn't recognize.
PI, Principal Investigator.
Okay.
So that is, yeah, that's kind of, that's one that I forget. So that is what we call people who are the lead on a research grant. You might also hear PIPD and have them used interchangeably. PI is the principal investigator, PD is a project director. Effectively, they are just a lead of a sponsored project where the project director might be leading a non-research related grant. But anyway, yes, the lead of the grant. Sometimes we call faculty PIs. It just happens, but yeah. Other questions? Yes.
Given that we interact so much with NYU Langone, are there resources for developing grants between the 2 institutes, or is there just nothing?
That's your response.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There are not. It's complicated. I think there will be though, because there's increasing, I mean, I think we've always wanted there to be. But we've had such different policies, even our intellectual property policy is different. So it's been hard to align what goes on administratively and legally there with what goes on administratively and legally here. Without us actually trying, there are a lot of existing collaborations anyway, but it would be great if we could incentivize them. So I think the first area where that's gonna probably happen is in biomedical engineering and bioengineering. There's a new faculty member that was recently recruited, Jeff Hubble, who works in non-infectious disease immunology work. So like autoimmune and things like that. So he's coming in and he's gonna spearhead this cross-school center. And I think that will, in doing that, will help kind of find better pathways to collaborate between the two. But I will say one of the reasons we don't tend to fund, we don't send money up to the School of Medicine to support their research because they have more money than we do. So we tend to fund our faculty and hope that the School of Medicine will fund their side of the collaboration, and mixed results. Yeah. Other questions? Yeah.
Are contract faculty eligible for the seed money?
Yes, in many cases they are. So you have to check. There are gonna be some where they aren't, but for the grants that come out of my office, they are with little tiny asterisks, which is that they do need to get principal investigator status from their department or school. But there is a very well-worn process for that now that should be pretty streamlined. So if anybody has any issues, if anybody here is a contract faculty and has issues trying to request PI status, you can reach out to me and I can help you with that.
Yeah, there's some grants that can be relatively standard, like I'm thinking about the career awards, for instance, that are going to stem, a very different, very broad spectrum of disciplines. Is there a way to either, get feedback on like best practice for careers or get access to maybe some recent successful career awards that have been awarded across the schools?
Yes. So we just had a few come out and we're going to be announcing those. Well, we're going to be kind of announcing refresh to our early career faculty portion of the wiki. So I would go there and look to see what's already in that section of the wiki. And we're going to be adding more examples of successful early career grants, including the NSF careers. And we have in the past done some workshops and we're planning to do that again. Sometimes schools do it And so we haven't let it, and so we're kind of just trying to figure out from the schools whether they're planning on it this year or if we can do it from our office. So, yeah.
Thanks.
Maybe we have time for a last question, and then we'll take a 5-minute break and transition over to our faculty panel. Any last burning question for Nina? Okay, it doesn't have to be burning.
You can feel free to reach out to me directly. You can also reach out to the research.development email address. I also get those, but my whole team gets them. So slightly faster response rate than if you email me directly, I will admit. And yeah, happy to help you at whatever stage you are in the process.
I just want you to know that Nina works all the time. I almost feel like she never leaves the office.
But don't email me on the weekend, please. That's reserved for my boss. Yeah.
You actually just repeat the email address?
Yeah, research.development@nyu.edu.
And again, just want you to know, if we don't call leadership from the provost office, you don't know who's listening, who's watching out for you, who has your back. And so I really, really wanted to make sure that you understand that there is, I guess, at every stage of leadership, someone's looking out there and to support you. So please reach out, don't feel shy. And thank you ever so much for everything you're doing.
My pleasure.
Okay, thank you. Let me tell you, I'm really, really, really happy that everyone in this group shows up. That's why we don't
She
have
just
enough
needs lots of
chairs.
people to
It's
ring a
awesome. So I just came back from day term in Abu Dhabi, and 8 of us fell sick because we had a trip in Uganda. And I gave my students a Zoom link. I said, please join by Zoom. And they all came in person. And I was like, wow, something's changing in the world. People want to go back in person. And I feel as proud when I see everyone here. Thank you so, so much for coming. We are now moving to a faculty panel. I always have faculty representing all different fields. Talk to you about their journeys, about research. I'll moderate this panel, but please feel free to go off script and talk about other things that you might think are pertinent to this group. They're generally first and maybe some second year faculty. Raise your hands again who are STEM. Okay, non-STEM, arts, I mean, all of that is non-STEM, but just so that you have an idea, arts. Okay, and
I know, that's what I was just thinking.
contract
You're
faculty.
stammering.
Okay, so this is for you to know, there's a mixture of contract and tenure track faculty. So I'm just gonna very, very quickly introduce our speakers, and then I'm gonna leave it to them to say a little bit more about their journeys. So I'm going in the order of the panelists listed on the slide. Dr. Ray Nuara, who's the professor of social and behavioral science, and he does everything related with tobacco and e-cigarettes and marijuana, all that fun stuff.
I do all that stuff.
All that fun stuff. That's right, ma'am.
And he's from the School of Global Public Health, so he didn't have a long distance to travel. And we are co-teaching a course this semester on commercial determinants of health. So he does the tobacco stuff. I'm doing alcohol and the food industry, and it's been a lot of fun. Also, you can talk more about your professional trajectory, but he's listed continuously for how many years now as the most highly cited scientist in the United States. So we'll just hold on to that.
A little secret, I don't know how that happened.
All right.
Spectacular point there.
Yeah. And he can tell you everything else about all his accolades, okay? The next person is Sarah on the slides, and she's a clinical professor at Wagner and the director of the Rudin Center for Transportation, which I think is a really big deal. I think top on my mind when I hear transportation is the congestion fee, okay, pricing. But I think that this is very impactful work, and so I really wanted her to come and talk not only about the creativity of the work, but how impactful it is to everybody, and the fact that she's a clinical faculty. Okay. Okay. Sean, who's an alumni of ECFI and never went away, which was awesome. Just so you know, once you're part of ECFI, you keep getting all these, announcements for different programs. And so Sean just finished the op-ed project with us. As a continuation, it's not like a continuation, but kind of linked to the ECFI. And then finally, Eric, who is in communicative sciences and disorders at NYU Steinhardt. He's an associate professor. And I'm just going to first, he also finished the op-ed
I was
project.
gonna say, we just did it, yeah.
Yes. So
Together.
with the intent of making big waves, op-ed obviously reaches so many more, the public in general. And so I think that they can also discuss a little bit about the impact of their work. But anyway, I think my first question for all of you is to very briefly tell us about your research journey at NYU, and also maybe your research journey in general, but also how NYU has helped you increase visibility or your research and scholarship or arts. So anyone, no order.
Art is scholarship. Art
Okay,
is
yes.
research.
I want to be inclusive of all the terminology. All right, so, yeah, whoever wants to.
that means you started.
Okay, I guess that means I start, just because I'm the sassy one. So this is my third year, so I just did ECFI the past 2 years. My work right now is centering around looking at queer people that were murdered while Congress debated LGBT inclusion in the National Hate Crimes Bill. So a piece that I just had in the Brooklyn Museum for the Brooklyn Artists Exhibition. I photographed all the locations where queer people were murdered in '99 and 2000, and did all the possible research in particularly in digital spaces to talk about digital visibility in '99 and 2000, as well as queer visibility and the complexities of it. I would say my research journey here has been pretty good, actually, especially for a fact that nobody funds the arts. I've gotten just from the university itself, I've gotten a couple of small grants, and then I got the Catalyst Support Grant. I'm saying this wrong, right? There's something.
Seed, yeah.
The Catalyst Support Grant from the Provost Office last year to, I'm working to actually build augmented reality triggering site markers for every location across the country to mark all these locations. So I got some seed funding from them. I was also able, the Provost has an AR VR lab or an XR lab, kind of gets called different things. And I got a lot of in-kind work from them as well. I've been working with Mass Design. If you know them, they're sort of like the biggest name in the memorial space. So we got a large grant from them to design the memorials as well. And so I'm working with Julie Rhodes, who's the previous CEO of the Names Project, which was the keeper of the AIDS quilt, to run strategy for our project. There's a documentary team that's working on a documentary about this project. So it's sort of like ballooned out in a lot of ways that when I first was like researching queer people and their deaths and driving around the country by myself for months, I did not imagine that happening. So we're also in conversation with MIT's Open Documentary Lab as well to work with us, and a bunch of the California Legislative LGBTQ Caucus is pledged to help us mark every location in the state of California. So that's like this big thing that will probably be the rest of my life practice. Other than that, I'm an artist. I show in museums and in commercial galleries. I have a gallery in my gallery in New York closed, but I have a gallery in Paris. I'm going to tomorrow. So I'm working on a new show for them as well.
Excellent, yeah. The one thing I forgot to say is it okay? Is it okay for the panelists if we have it more interactive? So after
Absolutely.
just raise your hands and ask questions. We don't want this forum to be something we talk at you.
Yeah.
Okay.
I have a question just for all the panelists in general. For someone who's new to the research arena, how do you frame your question? Like, how do you decide that this is a question that needs to be answered, and is there funding available for it, or are you just the only person thinking about these things?
Okay, hold off one sec. Let them introduce themselves and then we'll go into that.
Right there.
Okay.
I don't even know.
Eric, do you want to go
I need to
next?
think about that one now. Thank you.
Eric,
No.
go next.
Yeah, sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Eric Jackson. I've been here for 7 years. This is my 7th year. I've been here for 7.5 years. I am currently on sabbatical, yet I'm still here, so. I study stuttering and speech and the brain. So I'm also a speech language pathologist, and I kind of like bridge the clinical worlds with the sort of more basic science and basic research worlds. I mean, that's sort of my thing, which is, as probably most of you know already, is very important to find the thing. So I suggest if you haven't been thinking about that already, start thinking about that. In terms of the school being supportive for research, in my experience, they've been extremely supportive. There are lots of opportunities for seed money to start projects. There are also lots of opportunities if you ask for them and if you're very persistent. I think sometimes, especially early faculty are intimidated in certain ways to ask for things from their bosses or from the university. That, like, being sort of shameless in that regard, I think has helped me very much. So I wanted to make sure that but there are also mechanisms and things that NYU has that I think are ways to get your research supported. I suppose I should say, I'm saying that realizing the privilege that I have, while also being a person who stutters though, so sort of coming from it both sides there. Yeah, I think that's it for now. I'll keep it short, and then maybe we'll talk more on the questions later. Thanks.
Can't be pointed.
Generally that direction.
It's the natural direction, yeah.
Sure, I'll go. As was mentioned, I'm a clinical professor, which means that I'm not on the tenure track. I don't have a PhD, so I think that's a different course than a lot of other people take. I started at the NYU Rudin Center for Transportation as a research associate, actually in 2012, and just kind of hung on until now. And basically, I came to it from having several jobs around the city in transportation and technology. I worked for the city and the state in various capacities, and then came to NYU to kind of put those ideas into practice, or to put the practice into ideas, I guess. Here at NYU, at the Rudin Center, we focus on timely issues in transportation. So it's more current topics, things like climate change, congestion pricing, things like flooding in the subways. So these are all topics that are happening right now. And so having a research center, there are plenty of other transportation researchers around NYU and the city who are doing really fantastic long-term academic work. And what the Rudin Center specializes in is kind of quick hit assessments of topics happening right now. And a quick preview of my answer to your question is, we like to ask, what is nobody else looking at, right? So there are probably 50 people analyzing congestion pricing in New York City right now, but what are they not considering? And so that's the question that we approach every study with. And instead of pursuing long-term, multi-year research projects, we do more policy briefs, either sponsored within the university or through industry partners. And so it's I think a different model than a lot of other setups here at NYU, but it's fun.
I got a quick question.
Great.
I just got back from a sabbatical. Is there a noticeable decrease in traffic?
Yes.
around here.
Yes, it's about 8.5% less traffic
Yeah.
right now. We'll see more in the springtime, which tends to have more activity in the city, so it'll be a fairer assessment then.
Cool. So,
Yeah.
I'm Ray Nyora. I have a little bit more history perhaps than most folks, so forgive me if I talk a little bit about that, but I think it's relevant to kind of trajectories and finding opportunities for research. So I did my graduate work at Rutgers beginning in 1980. And what was 1980 notable for? Probably can't answer that. Ronald Reagan was president.
Reagan AIDS, like, what do you?
I know.
A lot of things.
Okay.
Good hair.
Now, I happen to be Canadian, so I actually came to the US to do graduate school. I was born and raised in Montreal. So this was like the United States was brand new to me at graduate school and everything. And I'm like, who's this Reagan guy? Anyway, I came to dislike him extremely over time. So all this whitewashing of his being a great president and all that, I don't remember it that way. And you know, I didn't really have skin in the game because I wasn't yet a citizen. I am a citizen now, et cetera. But anyway, after graduate school, and this is also part of the unpredictable journey. So I got my degree in clinical psychology. But after graduate school, I had to do a clinical internship. So I went to Brown University and ended up just staying there for 25 years by accident. And I fell into a pretty good environment, but it was 100% research. So for 25 years, I basically had to support myself with primarily NIH funding, other federal agencies, foundations, and so forth. And also worked in a medical school environment, which is kind of special in its own ways. But the way that things worked out and actually were really quite good and productive over those 25 years is I worked with a good team of people. We had many training programs, so internships, postdoctoral fellowships. And that was really important, having that kind of contact and pipeline of people that you interact with a lot. And we were always on the search for funding. And I learned very quickly that you can't go it alone, or at least if you go it alone, it's really, really hard. So you're better off teaming up with other people and kind of, trading places. Someone takes the lead on this project, you play a supporting role, then you take the lead on another project, and it's kind of the combination of things that keeps everything afloat. And that
So
also
within institution or external?
both.
Are you talking about?
Yeah, both. And that also leads you to, get better at identifying things that are both interesting to you, but also potentially important. And, that means interesting to other people, including funding organizations. And if you get into a role with those kinds of collaborations, it can be very sustainable over, a long period of time. I'm kind of proof of that. Anyway. Fast forward 25 years, I kind of, midlife crisis type of thing. But this opportunity arose to work at a foundation in Washington, D.C. It's called a Legacy Foundation. And my former boss at Brown had gone to NIH to head up an agency. He was there for about 3 or 4 years. And then he was tasked to do some work at this foundation. Gives me a call one day and says, "Hey, Ray, it's pretty good here. Why don't you come?" And so I did. I just kind of quit everything, ended up at a foundation. We still had academic affiliation, so I was affiliated with Johns Hopkins School of Public Health. And over the years, by the way, a lot of my research ended up being very much public health oriented epidemiology and clinical work, et cetera, et cetera. So that's kind of how I morphed into a public health person. Then about 7.5-ish years ago, I left that foundation, and it was great working in the foundation. My job was, I was director of science and research at the foundation, so it was terrific. Nice thing about foundations, they have money, and it's not. And if you're in the foundation, it's easy to spend that money, so that's the fun part. But anyway, things change. And about 7.5 years ago, I got a call from my former boss at the foundation, not the same person that was NIH. And she had just started up the School of Global Public Health at NYU. And she says, "Hey, Ray, think about becoming a faculty at NYU." And I hadn't been on my radar screen at all. But I said, hey, what the heck? And I looked for advice from, colleagues, and one person's advice stuck in my mind. And he said to me, everyone should live in New York City at least once in their life. I said, okay, that does it. So anyway, I ended up here, but I continued with all my collaborations. Those spanned the years and geographic boundaries, and developed new collaborations. So that model of kind of team science and teamwork continues to this day, and continue to kind of be successful. I ended up volunteering to fill in for a year to be the chair of the Department of Epidemiology here. And that ended up lasting 5 years. So I'm just off of that hangover, finished already, half a sabbatical, and I'm back. So I hope there's some words of encouragement in there. Trajectories and careers are not always kind of linear, but there are certain, things that you do. And it's really about the people that you meet and that and the relationships that you develop over the years that, kind of help keep you focused on where the ball is, but also, what directs you to things that are really interesting to do. And so that's kind of my quick advice.
Can you add a little detail about your being most cited in the world?
Well, so that's an outgrowth of a collaboration. So as one example, I've been on. So I have worked closely with the Food and Drug Administration, and they have a Center for Tobacco Products that's 10 or 12 years old. So Congress gave FDA the authority to regulate tobacco products, including like e-cigarettes and Zyn and, the pouch products and things and so forth. So that was a hotbed of activity. But also working with FDA allowed us to get into the ground floor of things like they developed and deployed a national longitudinal survey to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars. We helped to design the survey and so forth. So, that kind of, that affords just a huge amount of opportunity because you're working with teams of other people, including people in federal agencies. And, the job is to, collect the data, analyze it, and publish it. And so there's constant stream of activity that one gets involved in. And, you end up just kind of going along for the ride in a lot of cases. And so those kinds of opportunities are really, really good for your CV and so forth. But, to answer your question, I'm not exactly sure. It's not something I, set out to do.
Yeah. Great. I'm just gonna change what I'm gonna do in this panel. I'm gonna just already start inviting questions. We'll start with Sohail's and see how much time I have left. The only one question I need to get to at the end is how research and scholarship is viewed in the tenure promotion process, which we will save. So I'll flag you down. I need a few minutes for that. But please, let's just get the panelist, the participant questions. So Did your question get answered or do you?
Sure, Sean and Eric want to pitch in, I know.
Such
Want to repeat the question?
So the question is, how do you think about research, right? That you do your work, then questions that need to be answered. A lot of times I look at the research, I'm like, wow, this is such a tangent on how people think about, like, why would we even want to think about it? And then the product comes out, the research comes out, the paper, and then someone builds on it. How do you start that seed part? But, maybe this question needs to be answered. How do you articulate that?
Yeah, so for me, I think it like in the kind of work that I do, and I think that most scientists do, the question is at the heart of like what your work is, right? So I think my questions come from what I'm interested in, right? So what like drives me the most? That's where all of the questions start. I think passion is, I mean, probably the most important thing in like finding the motivation to continue, like and deal with all the rejection that you're bound to get along the way, and to keep you going, and especially if you're running a lab or a group of students or whatever, like to keep the motivation and passion alive so that they're inspired as well. And then it's been super helpful in my experience, for example, like brainstorming sessions with other colleagues and students and things in order to bounce the questions around and to see if they are really good questions, right? And then the next level is, okay, well then how can I carry these out? And part of that is, okay, well, what's fundable? And I think you actually specifically referenced that. I mean, I think that you can make anything fundable, right? Like there's always somewhere to find fund. Now, it depends like on a bunch of things, like how much funding you actually need, right? But I think those are the three things to think about. And I've spent a lot of time like taking the things I'm interested in, being a little bit bullheaded, tailoring them with what people think is interesting, and then kind of tailoring that a little more to, okay, well, what can I possibly get funded?
Thank you.
Yeah.
I
I
think.
don't know if someone else is gonna respond. And
Oh, Sean. was-
Sure, I mean, I think, do we have any artists in? Yes. My practice is one in which it's usually, I wake up one day and it's there. If we're being totally honest, and usually it's like, I just am an obsessive person and I like obsessively research anything that I mean, I have 70 tabs open on my computer right now because I'm working on the structure for my next show. So like, and that I'm constantly like flipping back and forth from and ending up in weird holes in the internet and all of that stuff. So I just kind of go for it. And usually there's two things that smash together in my brain that make maybe little to no sense. The project that I was talking about, which the digital piece is called Insufficient Memory. It came from finding a spreadsheet of queer people that were murdered in the US the same day that I found the Sony Digital Mavica, which was the very first commercially successful digital camera. And I looked at the camera, which came out in '99, was on the market from '99 to 2000, and I looked at the spreadsheet for those same years. And it was when the 106th Congress for the very first time debated LGBT inclusion in the National Hate Crimes Bill, because it was triggered by Bill Clinton's State of the Union address directly after Matthew Shepard's murder, right? So I was like, I guess those things go together now, right? Like nobody else is thinking like, that's a great idea. So when I drove across the country and photographed all these locations, I used the camera of the time, the Sony Digital Mavica, which still works, and you can still get things off 3.5-inch floppies, by the way. Because that's why it was the first successful camera, is because it shoots at 3.5-inch floppies, right? So for me, it's oftentimes like, oh, I'm looking at this thing over here and I'm looking at this thing over here, and nobody else thinks that they should go together. But like, actually, if you kind of look at where they overlap, there's something interesting in there. And not everything works out, but I find if I just keep doing that at some point I'm like, wait a minute, that's really interesting over there. That being said, because my work's, spoiler alert, a lot of people who were murdered in this country for being queer were trans. So I'm about to get labeled a terrorist by the administration, so I don't know how fundable I am anymore. That's, fun. So, and then I think that in some ways you're right, like everything is fundable, right? But, you're always writing for a different audience, right? Like, so we're marking locations across the country. Somebody was like, oh, you need to go through cultural heritage. You need to go through corrective journalism. You need to go through, right? Like, so we have angles at a lot of different people's funding. Like we fund things that affect like women and femme-identified people. Well, I have lots of that in my project. We fund corrective journalism. We fund AR/VR projects. We fund, blah, blah, blah. There's a lot of lines into the project that we've written grants for all of them, right? So I'm constantly like, every time I see a new opportunity, we're mashing things up and like pulling this thing from over here that really centers the corrective journalism or the historic sites or the whatever, right? And like shift it towards that. That being said, I'm also like, wrote my first NEA grant this year. Guess that's not happening. But, we're a very small team and we've had to be very agile from the very beginning, right? There's really two of us running this huge project. And we've always written it to be agile. So now I'm like, okay, Family Foundations, that's where we have to go. They don't have to, they're not announcing who they're funding, right? Like somebody could dig around in their 1099s and find that information, but like, it's less likely that they're gonna be identified as terrorist organizations. Whereas like, if we go to Mellon is gonna, like, people are going, Ford and Mellon is the big ones that the Trump administration wants to go after right now. So, right, it's like, be careful, so it's really just kind of thinking about how to stay agile when it comes to the funding part of it.
Can I just ask a follow-up?
Yeah.
Follow-up and then
Yeah.
Manny, okay.
Has NYU been able to help you connect with foundations?
So you guys did that foundation conversation, right? So there was an event, it had a cute name.
I don't even.
She
It's
can't even
such-
remember it, so that's so good.
It was Nina's.
It was
office.
Nina's project, okay, that's
I
fine.
was just there.
It was great. They brought in like, I wanna say 5 foundations, 6 different people. We had like a Q&A and then sort of rotated through. I will say, what school are you at?
I'm in Tisch.
Okay, I will say, I would talk to Dana Whitgo. I think she's really, we're weird birds over here, right? Like, there's not a lot of funding for the arts.
Yeah.
Just across the board, and then we are then sort of also hamstrung because like the larger university really, and I love you all out there, is much more catering for like what they see as a big grant. We think $20,000, woo! Meanwhile, like, everybody else is like, yeah, he laughs at me. He's like, oh, baby. Like, everybody, like, Silver is like, we don't apply for things unless they're $1 million to $2 million, and you're like, oh, God. There are, humanities grants, if you can find one that's 100 or more, you can do the seed funding grant. And then Tisch has a couple other programs that have been really helpful. And Drew has been really great for me in some ideas and things like that. But a lot of it in the arts is us kind of, I will say that like, pick something up to, different people and say, hey, can you look at this? Do you know any, but it's been building of specific relationships. And I'm happy to talk to you more specifically about
Yeah, make sure
who has
you're
been-
mentor.
who's been good resources for me. And also I just want to shout out to get yourself into the rooms and run your mouth off. That was advice that was given to me early here. NYU wants you to be famous and a celebrity, so they get the cred later on, right? So like if you can get yourself in a room with people who have power to support you and you run your mouth off and tell them all the things that you're doing, like it's really helpful.
And that's one of the things we do through ECFI, try to get you in those rooms, try to get you in
Yeah.
front of people, try to break down all those walls. Did you want to add? Because I
just
know
wanted to
Mandy's
add a-
patiently waiting.
Yes.
What's
A
the question?
quick
Okay.
comment, yes to all that, and also UDAR, the University Development Office, is really helpful at connecting you with alumni or New Yorkers or other independent people and organizations that want to put their name on something, and want to support you. So, bang down UDAR's door, sometimes they can be a little hard to come by, but they do a great job of matching you with people who are interested in your area and those people can be a great source of funding.
That's a great point. Does everyone know what UDAR is?
I don't even know what it is, by
I-
the way, I've been here for 7.5 years.
I was like this half of the table and it's like.
What is UDAR?
It's University Development
And alumni relations.
And alumni
Thank you.
relations, yeah. Their office is on the Fifth Avenue and 12th Street, the beautiful, that neighborhood. And each one is, UDAR they're actually hiring another 25 people-ish because we want to raise funds for more, the global projects and things like that. Excellent point. However, there are a couple representatives for each school. So it's a good something to ask your administration in your school or go to the UDAR website. Super good information.
Do it.
Manny.
Just another quick comment. Getting support is all about persuasion. And there's formal ways of doing that. You write grant proposals, et cetera, and there's an art and a science to doing that. But I think your comment about running your mouth off is on point because it's persuasion. It's getting, and part of persuasion is getting people interested in whatever it is that you're talking about and doing. And that's your passion. And you have to find ways, many different ways to kind of express that verbally, written, however, so that you're ready when opportunities present themselves or when you can make opportunities happen to do just that. It's really all about persuasion. And you should be able to persuade someone at least to be interested in less than 5 minutes. You should have scripts running through your head at all times, just, thinking about the opportunities. And let's face it, whatever you're doing, you're interested in, you're passionate about, right? Harness that. And make your arguments.
Manny.
So through this whole process, my question has now modified like 4 times. As a person who is based in Tandon but refuses to talk about anything AI, which is always a controversial thing in that school in and of itself. But I would challenge the only group that gets less money than the arts is folks like me who do community work. Or maybe there's a tie there at the bottom.
I mean, I'm art and community workers, like, nobody.
But definitely I talk about it because I'm also on the board of MAS and we could think about collaborations there. But for me, just broadly speaking, when we're thinking about, you were talking about all this support and stuff, when we're talking about measuring success, right? One of the big things is obviously grant funding and then there's pubs and stuff like that. But for folks that are on those like peripheries of things, like for me, working with communities, yes, I got this accolade, but there's no money with that. There's no there's a photo and a profile about your project on a website with Brookings, but it quickly it swept under when someone gets a 10 million, well, hopefully not NSF gives out money, but like a $10 million NSF grant or something from Google or whatever else. And it gets quickly overshadowed by, maybe your department, maybe your school. And then how do you go about and say, hey, my work is having impact, but it's not necessarily how you're measuring impact, right? And there was a secondary question about how do communities access your work? Because with a lot of our stuff, I argue always that the only thing more extractive than petrochem is academia. And we're never producing work that's actually consumable by the people we are working on, right? Not working for. So measuring success and then accessible research.
So I think what comes to mind listening to you is the idea of forming kind of broader coalitions that serve multiple purposes. And I'll give you an example. So I'm interested in the concept of harm reduction. It applies to, drug use, but it applies to, a whole bunch of other things. I'm an academic though, and my currency is research and publications and maybe grant awards. But there's a glaring omission unless I understand what's happening in the real world on the ground, and link up with people who are doing the work. But then what's in it for those folks? And that's the kind of conversations that need to take place in terms of forming these larger coalitions. But those conversations open up people's thinking, but also open up the landscape for thinking about opportunities. But then, to your point, attribution of, how you measure success. If you're part of a larger coalition, parts of which, measure success in different ways. Well, when you put it all together, it looks pretty darn good and everyone starts to get credit for the different pieces of it. Now you have to, it's a lot of work to develop these coalitions and sustain them and all of that, but hey, that's what we do. So I don't know if that helps at all, but that's kind of one reaction that I had.
I would love to add that part of the research game is self-promotion. And, every time you put out a piece of work, you're not just releasing a report into the ether. You are forming relationships with the reporters who then care about it. You host an event to release your work. Even if it's not something that you deem is event worthy on its own, you invite people from your coalition to be on a panel where you present this work and then they discuss their work and it's a whole conversation about a topic. You write op-eds about it. You can take the op-ed project, of course, that the three of us did. It's all about getting your profile, getting your work out there so that people pay attention, because that will snowball into future opportunities, future funding mechanisms. It has to be tied into your research.
I think for someone who's in the arts, the other thing is like, look, I'm at Tisch, everyone gets like Oscars and wins Sundance Awards in like every year. Like I'm quickly eclipsed by like a I don't know, $1 billion, $1 trillion industry, whatever. And so I think, if we're gonna look at like money or like major awards, like I'm always gonna struggle. There's no Oscars for visual artists, especially community active visual artists. That's just not, I mean, we could start one. But I do think that it is about like, when we're talking about metrics, like there's two different things happening, right? Are we talking about metrics for the space that is NYU academia? And like, because you mentioned, somebody getting $10 million and you quickly getting like this amazing Brookings Foundation, piece, like not getting its due or whatever. And I think NYU also measures our success also by like how, like what level of press we're hitting. Right, that like if the New York Times puts you on the front cover, they don't care if you didn't get $10 million, right? I mean, I'm being a bit exaggerated in that way, but like they do value fame as much as money, right?
Yeah, don't look.
Everybody's giggling like we don't know that NYU is like that's one of the things here, right? So I think it's also like, and part of it is convincing your department that it hit really high in terms of press and all those things. So part of it is just like convincing, like I send out things to my chair and everybody there to make sure that it gets on like our department website, and then I can send that to our PR team, and then the PR team, because they want it to send you back to an NYU website, right? So then the PR team will like put something out and direct people to our department website, right? So there is like some kind of like internal tricks to your departments too.
Chairs like that.
Yes.
And by
Yes.
the way, when we do the publishing and portfolio module, you're gonna have a presentation on the PR and communications team who you can connect with. Again, every school has their.
Yeah, and definitely make sure that you're sending everything to them and making sure that it's on your department website, because everyone in your department will push it out further that way. And then like metrics for, like grants and things like that. I mean, I write metrics into it. And then I also say, really, what we care about the most is like the community engaged process part of it and affecting this group of people. And this is how we're gonna like report back on that. And that's built into the system of like community work, right? So, you kind of have to tell them like, we're not gonna impact 100 million people in this country. Like, that's not the goal, right? In a lot of ways, like telling them ahead of time that these are your markers for success from a grant standpoint tends to be a smart move, generally speaking.
So just really quickly too, and this came up a couple times, is like finding good mentors. So for me, that's been like critical because people in my department, thankfully, like know how to play the game. And a big part of this is like playing the game, right? Like taking people out for coffee, taking people out for a drink and like, listen, I just want to get your feedback. Like, I'm not sure like what I should be doing to be successful here. Can you help? And like, most people will be totally into that, especially if you buy them a drink.
Bingo.
Yeah.
I will say, once every 2 or 3 months, I go on like a different school's website and search for different kinds of things that are happening over there and then write all the faculty that are working in spaces that feel like it's connected to my work and ask them if I can buy them a coffee or drink. So I've probably done that for 50 faculty members across the university at different schools by now, maybe more.
That's
And then maybe like a couple of them like have been helpful.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
that's like good, or like helpful in the sense of, professionally helpful, and that's like good
Yeah.
odds. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you haven't bought me a cup.
Look, dude, now that we know that you're the
now that
most
you read all
highly
the fun
cited
stuff.
person in the world.
Between the
then-
two of you, I'm like, booze, tobacco,
Well,
and
but-
weed.
But no, and actually I'm thinking, public health, visual arts. There's a connection there because public health is about communication.
I mean, we've
Right?
also pitched our work as, I tried to pitch it at NYU's big science grant that they were doing. I argued that marking and making awareness around queer loss of life is a public health threat, right? And I was told straight up from the provost's office, we agree with you, but that is not what this is not what the funding is earmarked for. They want like straight up, like science and health. They want it fundable by the, like.
But I love the connections. I love the, broadening your scope, meeting people, etc. I'm watching the time. The panel officially ends in another 10 minutes, and then I want to wrap up with you to talk exactly about where your mentorship is at the moment. So this session ends at 11:30, and the last few minutes are for me, but I don't know if you have a few more questions, I'm happy to dig into my time. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks. It's been very insightful. There's a couple of things it's going to build on maybe the coffee remark. And what you were saying before about collaboration. So I moved from Europe to the US and I'm rebuilding my network from scratch here. So there's of course some people that I knew from conference and everything, but like we had a couple of drinks, we had fun, but we never collaborated or anything like this. What have you seen as like successful practice to build collaboration with other people? Because what I've heard, for instance, which I think is very smart, is if it's within your school, start with a master's student project. So something where like you can kind of get, you put your toe in the water, you understand how the other one works, you understand if they're a psychopath in where you are, if there's a very different kind of psychopath. And then you can see if like you're complementary, you have like a good overlap and you have the same drive or same motivation that kind of makes you wake up on Monday morning. But when it comes to other institutions, I find it much more difficult because I've gone to other places, give seminars, you like shake hands, you know what they're doing, but everyone's pretty busy and kind of in their own things and you don't really have the same opportunities to do, low stake projects. So do you think that it's interesting, for instance, to say, I'm going to write proposals and suggest that someone comes as a co-I and, I don't really know what they're gonna do, but we'll see what comes out of the discussion, or what have you seen as good ways to maybe engage with people?
Well, on the latter point, yes, we do that all the time.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily just finding someone out of the blue, but you might say, well, so-and-so over at this institution seems to be, doing similar or, interesting stuff. We think that there could be value added to the work we're doing. You reach out to them. And most often they'll say, oh, that sounds interesting. And then you engage in a dialogue and you kind of see where it goes. So you're always kind of putting out feelers. And those sometimes pay off in unexpected ways. You might, get to know someone, and maybe 4 or 5 years later, it turns out that there's an opportunity, and you say, oh, this person's the ideal person to reach out, and boom, there's a collaboration. So it's always good.
Yeah.
The other thing I'd mention is, go to meetings, conferences, whatever, because what they're all about, it's as much social connection as it is communication of information. To me, going to meetings is all about people and getting to know them and them getting to know you. Even if they just know you a little bit, that's a positive.
Yeah, I agree. And I would also add joining industry associations so that they'll have repeated events. So you'll see the same people over and over. And so that helps you build a relationship with them. And then when you go to these events as an academic and not somebody from the industry, people love to tell you stuff that they shouldn't otherwise. And then you really have a leg up on information, which don't underestimate the value of that. Another thing that, I know people have really mixed feelings about this, but LinkedIn has been really helpful for me to figure out what other people are working on. And then if I'm starting a project and I need an expert in a certain topic and I know somebody wrote a post about it last week, I can reach out to them and see what they're working on and potentially collaborate.
I think LinkedIn's gotten better.
Yeah.
In terms of that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Yes, better and worse.
Well,
What field are you in?
I'm in engineering,
Okay.
mechanical engineering.
I don't know how it is for that, but it's terrible for the arts. Like LinkedIn is like the worst place.
Social sciences as well.
Oh, yeah. I'm like, there are no artists on LinkedIn, like those of us who teach too, but yeah, it's terrible. for
Urban
us.
planning and transportation folks,
Yeah.
great on LinkedIn.
Just to emphasize Sarah's point too about the sort of informal nature of meetings and developing relationships with people, there are things that I just won't say in this room right now that will definitely be helpful for you.
No, I think you can. This is a very safe space.
No, probably not.
I mean, this is what these forums are for.
I'm being somewhat facetious, but not really so much. So I just want to like putting yourself out there and developing these kinds of informal relationships with people where you can both really talk in confidence, I think are really important. So
I mean, that's how Ray got all his jobs. He just told you.
Yeah, just runs his mouth off, right?
So put a coffee in me and I'm off and running.
is that all it takes, right? It is.
All right, so I want to actually, like I said, save this question. I know there's a lot of anxiety in this room at the university level. I can bet you Nina didn't sleep, Stacy Bloom didn't sleep last night, right? Like, how is all this evaluated, and especially in this new era of research being such a big question, scholarship being such a big question in terms of funding. I don't think any of us have this magic wand and have a response, but I still want your insights on how it's counted. And I always ask Ray to come to that session you guys will have about the tenure and promotion dossier, because he's reviewed many as chair, as being on the provostial committees. So he can tell you and others in whatever role at the school or central level you might play, how it counts, but also in this new anxiety. So you can.
The one that we woke up in today?
Yes, that we woke up in today, but also to know.
It's been a week.
For you to know that everyone all the way at the top understands it, knows it. And so I don't think you should only go through this fearful journey on your own. But all right, let's see what they have to say. Rick, do you want to start?
Well, so, on the topic of kind of what counts, there's sort of the traditional silos of what counts, you know, publications and peer review journals, grant awards from, you know, certain sources, et cetera. But things are changing and evolving, and they should. And that's anxiety provoking. And I've been thinking about that a lot lately. Things like, you know, open access publications, but more than that, we're going to see the changes happening. And institutions are going to have to adapt in terms of what gets counted. We can't stick with the old ways anymore. But again, this is a time of flux, a time of change, and there are going to be a lot of discussions, you know, about that sort of thing. But I think we can steer those in a positive direction because there are more opportunities for things to count now than there were before. You know, we're not using typewriters to type our papers with whiteout anymore, et cetera. Which, you know, I wrote my dissertation on the first word processor ever. IBM, and the software was called WordPerfect.
Oh, yeah.
And it was my dissertation advisor's first computer when I was in grad school. And I asked him if I could, you know, use it, and he let me. And then I ended up breaking it.
One thing is that with the, I think we can also brainstorm with departments on things like this and metrics terms, right? Like,
Absolutely.
so we have at NYU, we have this, I don't even know what it's called. But it's where we track our yearly.
Interfolio.
Yeah.
It's on Interfolio.
It's on
Yeah, yeah, but there's like a section in
Faculty 360.
Anyway,
Yeah.
whatever, yeah, that, right? It's horrible, right?
Number.
Right.
So what we have in our
turned
department
all the
is
way
we have our own sort of rating system that we all developed, and we put like, yes, it's still bean counting and it sucks and it's annoying, but we have like so many things on there that basically like covers everything that anybody in our department is doing that they deem is productive. And then that's what gets counted when we're assessing P&T and all of that. So this is, I think, a discussion to have with the department that you're in about, okay, well, what can we do differently as opposed to just using that system, which again, like, I think the university just uses that for like tracking, like it doesn't really use that
I
system
would
for
love to
anything
talk
else.
to you all about it.
Okay.
I
Many
am,
people in the libraries would.
yeah, Elsevier's #1 hater, and they bought it in 2022. I have an entire spiel.
Okay.
So if you would like your department to hear my spiel, I would love to do
They
it. Please
bought
invite me.
Faculty 180.
Uh-huh.
Yes,
They bought
Our
Interfolio.
publications and our
So if you
Oh,
can
interesting. I
imagine
did not
the
know
data
that.
infrastructure network that Interfolio is
Yeah.
now producing, they have access to our data from the entire academic scholarly life cycle, now to our entire employment life cycle.
Oh, wow.
From the time we
Interesting.
apply for jobs to applying for tenure and promotion, to our yearly outputs, to emeritus status. And they are,
Is basically them making us pay to make the data machine readable for them so they can sell.
so that they can then create an analytic software that would be able to compare faculty against other faculty. So anyhow, would love to come to all of your departments.
It was a great presentation.
NYU Wagner has stopped using that system because of this,
Oh,
because of this
interesting.
discussion.
So wait, does it compare faculty at other universities or here?
It's everywhere.
Everywhere.
Yeah, I did it at my university before this.
Wow.
I would say the one thing I will say about them is that as an artist, it's not really gonna help them that much. So like, I don't know what they're doing with any of that data, because it doesn't make any sense. To the system that I used before that, and I think maybe my first year here, I'm trying to remember. No, the system I used before that was so terrible for the arts in particular. At least Tish has spent a lot of time modifying it, so it could better describe what a research practice for creatives are. And so I think that for the artists in the room, we have a very different world of what scholarship looks like for us, right? So, it's what we talk about at Tisch is like research and scholarship are like the creation of knowledge, and that is what you do as an artist on a regular basis. So everything we do is research and scholarship, but it really looks very different than most other people. Like most of you are probably gonna be required to like put out a book or write a paper. I don't have to do any of those things, right? I do actually publish. Shout out to the op-ed project. That was really a great experience. I highly suggest you all get yourselves into that process. And so like I do those things, but I'm not required to publish or go to conferences or any of those things. I still do it for a lot of other reasons, right? But we're like, how many solo shows have you had this year or in the past couple of years? And it's a really different process for us.
Yeah, I'm measured on public impact, and as a clinical faculty, it's definitely a different metric system. Are any of you clinical? Okay, well, so for the clinical folks, everyone has different set of metrics. Mine have to do with public impact, which means how much do I testify at public hearings? How much do I publish, or how much am I mentioned in the media? How many students am I employing and, training for future employment after graduate school? So I think that there is more progress on thinking through metrics for clinical faculty, and it just hasn't made its way to the tenure process.
And to your point, actually, one thing I will say is that I do think now everybody's departments and schools can be a bit different, but NYU is more flexible on what looks like scholarship than most universities anywhere close to our ranking, right? I have a friend who was like, oh yeah, everybody on this entire search was like, no, like we are really forward thinking about like all this other stuff. And then at the end they were like, well, their book didn't get published with Brown and they should have published with Brown. So we're not even gonna look at them for a finalist, right? Even though everybody's lip service was that, and that is not a vibe that I've gotten out of any part of this institution. Now, there could be corners of it that are still very old-fashioned in that way, but I will say that generally speaking, I feel like we're a lot more open.
I think you're absolutely right about that. And to add to your point, even if you're a tenure track faculty going up, there's always a section in your statement, which we will get to when we get to that module about the impact, right? How is your scholarship impacted communities, someone, clinical practice, the public. So there is always that. And I think you're right that NYU is progressive and open-minded and to be as inclusive as possible.
I would say there's also like, I think as faculty, we can put it on the dean's office and the provost's office, like, and say, I need to know exactly what you think is going to get me promoted, right? And like take a real sort of active approach in doing that. And I mean, then at least there's recourse in case something bad happens later on.
Well, I just went through 30-year review and I found it really helpful. Like I basically wrote a tenure packet, right?
Yeah.
And like turned it in and they were like, this is our feedback for you on it. And they're supposed to give you feedback on like, if you want to get tenure, this is where your holes are. Right, so there is a process that somebody's going to tell you or should tell you, it's their job to tell you what you need to do, where you need to fill things out.
I found that super helpful too, the 3rd-year review.
And that's why always want to keep a few minutes aside to talk about your mentoring aspects, because it starts with that. But let's see if we have a couple more questions and then we'll end, and I'll give you 5 minutes at the end. Yeah.
I have a question. Can you describe for some of you who are both clinical or assistant professors or associate professors, when you applied from going from assistant to associate rank, how much did your scholarship help, especially if you're clinical, or what are the things they're looking for in terms of you?
I mean, I haven't gone up yet. I just did the 3rd-year packet, but I would say that it's a crapshoot with Tisch, right? Because like even every department's different, right? I'm in a visual art department at a school that's dominated by film and acting. Right, so I'm in like the weird department at a weird school at a university, but Tish is like the crown jewel according to everyone. And we're also like just a bunch of weirdos, so I think it's like, it's really complicated to give a clear answer, other than the fact that I do think they were like, oh, you had 4 museum shows last year and a solo show, and you published an op-ed and you did all this stuff and it's all over the place and like, great. You know, like that seemed to be sort of all over the place. You would have a very
I
different
actually
answer.
want to interject here and say that, you know, everyone's clinical contract looks different. So
Oh,
at arts
interesting.
and science, for example, they do not want you to engage in scholarship. In public health, you can engage in scholarship, but there was a point where I think at Tandon, you can completely engage in scholarships. Each school has different needs and different wants from a clinical faculty. And that's why it's really, really important that you go and read your specific handbook and see what the criteria are. All right, maybe we can have one last question and say thank you to the panelists.
This has been so helpful. My question is, what's the best way to leverage student involvement? So I have all these projects that I'm gonna get started this semester and I need help because I can't do it all on my own. And you're saying I shouldn't be doing it all on my own. And I'm sort of an independent worker, but what's the best way, like, you know, undergrad, grad, PhD students, like, what should they be doing? What could they be doing? And, you know, what's the best way to even get started on, you know, pulling in students?
Well, the model that we have in public health is the faculty labs. So, and, you know, anyone can start one up. And the idea is that you engage with students and you have something to offer, an experience. And you have to, you know, advertise that to attract them. But then once you get it going, it becomes kind of self-propagating because students talk to each other, et cetera, and say, oh, this is a really good experience, hook up with this faculty person, join their lab. And then you just have to, you know, have structured time with them to work on projects and to, you know, weekly meetings, whatever it takes. So that there is often a quid pro quo. They're, you know, you're getting stuff that you need done, but they're getting the experience in return, which is good for them because they can, you know, that goes on their CV, et cetera, et cetera. So, it you know, it can be very, it's in a sense, it has to be very organic. And then but once you start it going, it can become self-perpetuating. I don't know if that answers your
I
question.
think it's a win-win.
Yeah.
You can
Yeah.
delegate.
Nursing, college and
A
nursing.
lot.
Yeah. So, so one thing that public health does is at the beginning of this, each fall semester, we have a student day at Kimmel and everyone shows up and the people who have, the faculty who have labs do like a little poster session and students can sign up.
So you would recommend can we just start a lab?
Yeah,
That's
you
my
could.
question,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
Okay.
Students love it, you know.
Absolutely.
And how do you do that at NYU? Maybe, I know we're at time, so maybe we can talk
You
after,
just-
but.
Maybe I
You
can
do
talk to you
it.
because I've.
You just call it a
You
lab.
wouldn't even-
Start- Yeah, that's, I don't think there's like, it's not like starting a center
Yeah.
or something here. It's just starting like
Yeah, just throw
all
a website
faculty
up.
have the.
Yeah, and then, you create a website, which we've done, et cetera.
Yeah, I'd love to
you
talk
know.
more about these details.
I'm
Yeah.
very happy to
Thank
talk to
you.
you about it
Okay,
because I've
thank
had
you.
some experience in school.
And these are student volunteers or
Whoever,
how do you
like-
pay them?
Some of them are volunteers, some
Yeah,
of them
so-
could be from paid.
Exactly, it could be both, right? Like,
I learned.
and it kind of depends on what the experience of the student
Yeah.
is, right? So obviously, there's like a tiered system involved where people with no experience would be volunteers if they're okay with it. People with some experience might be paid as undergrads or what, right? But it varies.
Work study, some of them have.
I was gonna
For
say,
work
there,
study.
like, so Tish is a weird place, we're not allowed to hire our students.
Oh, wow.
If they can ever be in our class, we can't hire them until they can't anymore.
Wow.
It's they're having to go back and look at it. There was something that happened. But there is through the provost office, it's through your office, right? Through research that you can apply for work study students.
No, I think they come with work study funding and then you can hire them.
Yeah, but so you could put out like essentially like I'm always like, can somebody bring me a stage manager?
Right.
I need a stage manager to be important and in charge of like large projects for me. You know, like, so you can like ask for specific skills. I can't remember what that program's called.
Yeah, I can talk
Wasserman
more.
Center.
Yeah,
Workforce hiring.
there's things like that.
But again, I really respect the privacy of everybody here and thank you all for being so super honest. I think now that we've actually gotten into your actual modules, right? Research, portfolio, publishing, you'll see there's going to be a lot of insights you'll get from various faculty. We'll always share the slides. Yeah, Lauren, if you can already post them on Brightspace so that you have the resources. I just want to say a huge thank you. Huge thank you. For saving your time. You could, you're off the hook now. I just want to wrap up with a few announcements or stay, get more coffee. I just want to wrap up with two announcements actually.
For you.
One of the things I
He's going out for
do
a cigarette.
is the New York
no,
City
no,
writing
same.
salons. These are the dates for the
You're
upcoming
one of those
ones.
cool kids
Please
who
watch out
presents.
for announcements from
I
Lauren.
was trying.
They've been very good so
Trying to
far.
be.
We've had continuous presence by faculty who basically form their little writing groups. Next one. Yes, we've been asked to do thank you. A pedagogy panel for the international faculty, anybody who identifies as international faculty, just a very specific panel on pedagogy, which is happening on February 26th. It's a breakfast. It's most likely in this building, and we're going to have people share out their strategies, especially because it counts so much for your dossiers and how they managed to overcome some of the barriers they've perceived. Anyone welcome, and Lauren will send out an invite for that. I believe an invite is coming up for your conference as well, once you
I'll
say.
share that.
So that's also something. Is there anything else, or can I just ask them my last question on mentoring? Okay, thank you. So, last semester we onboarded you, we selected you from your applications. We're kind of starting all the pillars of what matters in a faculty's life starting now, right? One of the things is mentorship. We give you some time to sort of settle in. You have to find your mentors. Please know that no one's going to come and serve it to you on a platter. If it's an arranged marriage where they've assigned you to a mentor, it may or may not work out. Now is the time you really start thinking about who your mentors are. We want you to have one career mentor and one technical mentor, someone who knows your field. Within your school, you can have additional mentors outside in your, other schools, other departments through these coffee chats. But it is super important that somebody navigates your path. Coming here, reflecting on the ideas, the strategies, the resources available at NYU, it's a lot. You've covered a lot today. You'll probably have to go and process this information. That's why we roughly have monthly seminars. But I think your next task is to discuss with your accountability partners some of the things you've learned from this and who your mentors can be and how to approach the mentors. We have cheat sheets on Brightspace. Lauren, we have the cheat sheet and the communications.
I have to unhide them, but they're.
Okay, you have to unhide them, but I don't want to give you more information before I speak about it here. What we basically want you to do is reach out to people either through coffee, those email templates that we have provided you. If you don't know how to reach out to someone, whatever it takes, go out with them for a walk. Please know who your mentorship team will be. Either it could be the formal ones, but you can always scaffold it with additional ones that you feel comfortable with. So 11:31, I went 1 minute extra, but I'm here to answer any of your questions for a few more minutes. And otherwise, I'm really, I can't tell you how happy I am that everyone comes in person and interacts with each other, because if you only show up on Zoom, then it beats the purpose of you getting to know each other across the schools. So always know that this room is available for the next half hour or so. If you want to stay and chit chat, always, we try and keep that half-hour buffer, or to follow up on anything, or then you can just connect outside. All right, so thank you ever so much. I hope this was helpful to you.
Yeah.
Yeah.